If you're being abused within the family home, right, and there's no love there, there's no care there, there's no nurture, just being a human being, you're going to want that from someone, from somewhere. And this is how gang culture has grown. If you're not getting your needs met somewhere, you will find belonging somewhere. Even if it's not beneficial for you in the long term, you're going to want to find that connection, because that's what human beings want, need. So this is where the grooming process comes into play. So my name's Chris Tuck, and I'm one of 6 children, siblings, and I grew up in around Penge, Crystal Palace, Bromley, Croydon, and now West Wickham. So all round South East London, really. I was born in 1970, now 55, so I've got many years under my belt where I've endured a lot of adversity, but I've also been able to heal from a lot of that adversity, move forwards in my own life, and bring many people alongside me to enable them to fulfill their potential as well. So I was the eldest girl, born to my mum and my dad. They had 3 other children, 2 boys and a girl. And my dad and my mum separated when I was 7. And my dad remarried a lady 4 doors down. She had 7 children, all girls. Her youngest was 4 months older than me. So they were a lot older. And my mum, when she left when I was 7, she was trying to rebuild her life so she could come back and get custody of us. Back then, there was no like women's aid or refugees for women that had gone through domestic violence to go to. So when mum left, she was just really trying to rebuild her life to get some funds together so she could come back and get us. So she went and married someone else. And when she came back into our lives, Dad had been found guilty of sexual abuse crimes, and he'd been put into prison. We had been left with our stepmum, who was starving us, mentally, physically abusing us. And mum was trying to get custody of us through the family courts while this was all going on. And she eventually managed to be successful in that, because my dad literally signed over custody because he was going to prison. And my stepmum declared that she no longer wanted us because we wasn't bringing enough benefits for her. So there you go. So went back to live with mum when I was 11. And we all thought that we were now going to be in a safe environment, a loving environment, a caring environment. And we were taken better care of to a certain extent. We were fed, we were given clean clothes, we had a roof over our heads. We went to school, we were looked after in all of the physical aspects of being looked after. But the stepdad was an alcoholic, the mental abuse continued, the physical abuse continued, and the sexual abuse started. So when we were living with my mum and my dad, the domestic violence was between them. We didn't really see it, but we knew it was happening. When I was with my dad and my stepmum, there was physical abuse going on between those two. Lots of shouting. My dad even used his air gun one day to shoot at my stepmum in an argument. And that was very traumatic to see. So as I said to you before, you never knew really what was going to happen, when. You didn't know what was going to trigger what. So you was literally living on your nerves. There was a dynamic in this household where my stepsisters, if we did something wrong, they would tell their mum, or our dad, and we would get punished. Yet if we did it, us 4 children, if we reported on them for doing something wrong, we would then get punished for tittle tattle. So my dad never protected us from her, and that is one of my big triggers that I've had to deal with in healing, was that there was no one there to protect us. When my dad got put away for sexual crimes against some of my step-siblings and my sister, not me, my stepmum's abuse of us escalated just because she could. That would be starvation, that would be physical hitting, that would be coming straight home from school, being sent up into our bedrooms that were very bare, very basic, when we could hear and see children playing outside in a summer's evening. So it was that kind of power and control that she exerted. Then we went to live with mum and stepdad, and he would literally rule the roost, and if there was something that he didn't like, you would know about it. So he would go for a Sunday pub drink, come home, we would know that he was going to come home. As soon as the key went in the lock, we'd all scuttle away because we knew that this thing was just going to erupt. We'd been preparing dinner, Sunday dinner, for hours, and we would have it all on the table, ready and waiting for him and his key to come in the lock. He would come in, literally look around, decide that he would pick on one of us. We weren't allowed to talk back, otherwise there would be violence straight away. And then if we dared to say anything or not say anything, he would still keep picking until there was a response or reaction, and then the whole table would just get upended. The food would go everywhere. Mum would end up crying. He would end up having a go at her, and us children, if we could, we would just scarp her. So it was all this tension all of the time. With my stepmum, it was more of, she wouldn't even allow us to look her in the eye. And I found looking people in the eye very difficult for a long, long time. So it was almost like, look at me when I'm speaking to you, but she'd be shouting at us and spit would be coming from her mouth. Look at me when I speak to you, but the minute you looked at her, how dare you look at me? Who do you think you are? And then you get hit. So there was a lot of conflicting messaging going on all of the time. No, but it was over familiar with people. I think I'd been so harmed by other caregivers in my life that I really wanted my dad to be my protector, my carer, and I really loved him back then when I was a child. And when I found out, when he was arrested at home, when I found out what he'd been arrested for, I didn't want to believe it. 100% didn't want to believe it. I thought my stepsisters were setting him up until my blood sibling, sister, told me that she had also been affected. So then I had to believe it. When you're in the family environment, you tend to lean towards people who you feel are protecting you, and you tend to want to believe a certain thing about them. And they may be abusing other people within the family structure and not abusing you. They might be a friend to you, but an abuser to one of the others, and that can be very well hidden. So with my dad and my stepmum, it was clear that my dad wasn't protecting us anymore, just by the way that things were going. And he was over familiar with some of my step sisters. But because I was of a young age, I didn't really understand what was going on until I got told afterwards what did happen. So when you're in it, you don't always see it. And especially when there is other abuse happening, like the mental abuse and the physical abuse, it's all about surviving, and it's not always about understanding and seeing exactly what is going on. When I was with my mum and stepdad, I was 14. I wasn't 7 to 11. I was older. By this time, I had been sexually abused by someone outside of the family home at the age of 9, which was reported to the police, but he was never captured or convicted. So I was already, by the age of 10, more worldly wise to what abuse looked like, what it felt like, and how I could keep myself safer. So when I was with my mum and stepdad, as I've said, I was a lot older, and I could see what kind of person he was. He would touch different women's breasts just as oh, you've got nice boobs. He'd say something different, but I want to keep it clean. He would fondle, touch. He would be outwardly doing this. And when we came to have go through the criminal justice process to try and bring him to court and make him pay for what he'd done, it came to everyone's attention that he had a pattern of behaviour of doing this. So he sexually assaulted me by touching my breast. But at the time, I took action against him by kneeing him in the groin and basically telling him that if he ever touched me again, I'd kill him. And that is when I left home, because I felt really unsafe. I couldn't carry on. So I felt like I had, for me, nipped that in the bud at that time. I hadn't, but at that time I felt really empowered by what I'd done. I knew that he'd obviously been lured, L-E-W-D, if that's not how you pronounce it. His behaviour was lured. It was not right, but that 70s and 80s, 90s, people sort of got away with that a lot more, but it wasn't right, but they still got away with it. But then I found out that he'd been raping and sexually assaulting my sister. And that is when I went to town. That is when I was just like, we reported it to the police. We got social services involved. We made sure that the 2 half-sisters that were left in the house by this time, because there were 6 of us, my mum and him had 2 children, so they were our half-sisters. We spoke up, we spoke out, we made sure that social services were in the picture, making sure that he knew. There wasn't enough evidence to do anything at the time, but he knew that if there was a sniff of him going anywhere and doing anything to those 2 young children, he'd have to pay for it. So even though us 4, my elder brother, me, my sister and my younger brother had left home by that time, we felt that we'd done the most we could have to keep those 2 younger children safe. What else could we do? We were all young. We were like 18, 17, 16. We were all so young. We couldn't take or be responsible for 2 younger children. So we gave out strong messaging that we were watching and waiting for him to do anything wrong. Anyway, long story short, in 2016, as part of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, there was this Truth Project. We told our story. We shared the abuse that had happened and the justice that didn't happen. And they said, do you want to report it now in 2016 for non-recent abuse? And we're like, can we? Yeah, you can. So we re-reported everything. We went through the criminal justice system between 2016 and 2022. We tried to get this man into a court of law. CPS kept shutting it down. No further action, no further action. So I went through the whole victim's right to review process. No further action, no further action. I took on a solicitor and a barrister. They took me on pro bono, and we went after just my stepdad because they can't afford to do all of this work for nothing. But they said there's enough evidence to get him prosecuted for what he did to my sister. So we felt as a family, let's do that. Let's get my sister justice, and then we all get justice. We got into magistrates, we got him into Crown, CPS came in, closed it all down. So that left me with a rage that you would not believe. It turned up in all areas of my life, like a huge volcanic rage. I had 2 years of EMDR trauma therapy to get that out of my system. So I don't know if you've ever read a book called The Body Keeps the Score by Professor Van der Kolk. It shows you, explains it, how trauma, if suppressed, if not dealt with, how it gets into your body and stays in your body. Yeah. So throughout my lifetimes, so I'm 16 to 28, I dealt with my trauma that I'd suppressed deep because I wasn't speaking about it. I was masking. Bulimia, where I'd made myself throw up. Running, run. Made me feel good. My life, I'm in control of my life, but I wasn't. When you look back, the bulimia, the cleaning, the constant running was all coping mechanisms for dealing with the hurt, the anger, the sadness, the bereavement, whatever emotion and whatever feeling you can think of, it's all for that. So when I couldn't get my sister the justice that she deserved, my body and my brain were just like in free fall. If you're being abused within the family home, right, and there's no love there, there's no care there, there's no nurture, just being a human being, you're going to want that from someone, from somewhere. And this is how gang culture has grown. If you're not getting your needs met somewhere, you will find belonging somewhere. Even if it's not beneficial for you in the long term, you're going to want to find that connection because that's what human beings want, need. So this is where the grooming process comes into play. Perpetrators, they know how to get their victim. They will either know it straight away just because they've got lots of practice at it, or they will watch, they will try and build relationships either with the kid directly, like what happened to me and the bus driver outside of the family home, which I'll come back to in a moment, or they will be part of the family, the extended family, and they will see what is going on and they will come in and be that, saviour kind of person, and they will groom the people and get access to the children. So often you will hear, he would never do that. He's a pillar of community. She's so well known, so well loved. So they've groomed the adults to get a certain perception about them. Yeah, he's a good guy. She's a great woman. They do this for charity. They do that. Jimmy Savile. They just groom And then they access the children when they can. Many of them are opportunists, but they've built that access in. So for me, not getting what I needed within the family home, and that was my dad and my stepmom at the time, was living London Road in Bromley. He would park, my perpetrator, parked his minibus, school minibus outside the back gate. We would be hanging around outside because that's what kids did in the 70s, 80s. We played outside. We were literally got told to get lost and not come back till tea time. So we were playing outside. He saw that because he parked his van. He parked his van a long way from where he lived. There was no need for him to park his bus, his minibus, outside our back gate. He could have parked it in London Lane, not where we lived. But he parked it there. So then he would, hello, how you doing? You all right? Just conversation. And we'd be very wary. But then when there's 2 or 3 of you and one of you gets the courage to go, oh yeah, like speak back to him, then the rest of you go along with it. But he would then go, do you want to come on my minibus? Do you want to come and have a look on my minibus? You come and, just come and have a look. And we're like, yeah, great. And he goes, could you look after my minibus for me? Make sure there's no other children go near it. You're special, but you can come near it. And when I'm here, you can come in it, you can sit on the chair. So can you see, it's all of that, the nicety and making you feel special. And then he'd go, do you want the sweets? I've got given these sweets today. Would you like this sweet? Yeah, and give you a few sweets. And when you never have that, he's my best friend now. Yeah. And then it was like, and then you look for him. You look out for him because he's not a threat, he's a friend. And then before you know it, it's like, I haven't got any sweets on me today, but I've got some back at the house. Do you want to come? Can you see what I'm saying? So off we trot. He's our friend. He's not a threat, he's a friend. Off we trot, and that's where the sexual abuse happened within his flat to 3 of us. And you would have thought that maybe one of us would have ran, screamed, all of that. None of that happened. We were all complicit in keeping it a secret until it wasn't a secret. He abused each one of us in a different way, all while we were in the same room. Okay. Then we went back home, and it was a couple of days later that I spoke about it. I had a breakdown about it. I was 9 years old, so I couldn't settle. It wasn't right. It didn't feel good. I felt a certain way. I've written about it in the book, and I don't really want to go into like a lot of detail here because I can feel myself getting upset, okay? So you can see how things like 30 odd years ago can still impact you if you talk about the emotional level of it, okay? So it's really important that I didn't want to get into trouble with my dad and my stepmum because there are always consequences for behaviour. And I knew that you shouldn't go back to people's homes, stranger danger. I knew there's going to be consequences for doing that. So I had all of this emotion going on in me. I couldn't understand any of it. I was 9 years old. But I did break down crying and said that this man had touched me. And then that's when the police got involved. But back then, it doesn't happen now, but back then you used to go to the police station and the police used to do forensic internals to see if you'd been raped or not. I hadn't been raped. And I told the police that. I didn't know what the word rape was. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know any of that. I just knew that this man had done something to me that I didn't like. And I remember them saying, oh, we've just got to check. This is the police. Just got to check. And I'm like, no, the man didn't do anything like that to me. And then there was like, no, we need to double check. And they did an internal on me in the police station back in 1979. It would never happen now. And that lived with me as part of the abuse right up until quite recently when I had more therapy on it. So our responses to child sexual abuse disclosures needs to be so different, because they should never have done that to me. So we were talking about energy earlier. When you are growing up in domestic violence households, you literally live on your nerves. You don't know what's going to happen next. You are literally waiting, watching and listening for the next thing that's going to go off, that's going to make you unsafe or vulnerable to abuse of some kind. And you're trying to navigate all of that to keep yourself safe. This hypervigilance that I would say all victims and survivors have really rules your life. And I think that that might be a good message to give out to your audience, that if they find themselves thinking and feeling like that, that can be really detrimental to long-term health and well-being if it's affecting their life to the extent that was affecting mine. And I had to go and get therapy and help to try and calm down and dull down all of the, what's going on? All of that hypervigilance, all the triggers, because that brings its own trauma. Yeah. So 3 domestic violence households at the age of 16, I thought, need to leave home. It's really not safe now. And I can leave now because the police won't bring me back. So at the age of 16, you're allowed to be an adult and you're allowed to go and do what you want to do. So I decided, because my brother had already left when he was 16, that I was going to go and out into the world by myself and make the world what I wanted it to be. I wouldn't make my life any worse than those 4 adults that were in my life already, who had, literally given me nothing. So I left at the age of 16, and from 16 to the age of 28, I just masked. I turned up into the world. I was Chris. No one knew my childhood, my background, because there was a lot of shame associated with my background. There was a lot of guilt. And there was a lot of, I didn't want people judging me for other people's, my caregivers' actions. I wasn't responsible for their actions, but their actions had created me. And I didn't want anyone to know about that. So for that period of time, I was trying to build my own life and no one knew about my back life. So at the age of 28, I was a qualified management accountant. I had my own roof over my head, i.e. mortgage. I had a very credible job. I was married, still am married to the same person. I had my first child. When I held my son in my arms for the first time, and you would have heard me say this in a lot of different interviews, I literally had this overwhelming love for this little human being. And I vowed that if anything ever happened to them, I would literally kill for them, because that was the love that I felt for my child. But at the same time I felt that and said that internally, I then recognised that no one in my life had cared like that for me. So then there was sadness, there was anger, there was bereavement. There were so many emotions going on. And that was the start of the slide of my mental health. So 2 years after having my son, and it took that time, I had a breakdown at work. And that breakdown was horrific. However, I now call it my breakthrough, because I changed careers. I looked at the impact of adverse childhood experiences on mental, emotional and physical health. I became an expert in health and well-being. As I said, I changed careers to become health and wellness coach, fitness coach, and I've retrained in a lot of different disciplines. And it led me to stand up publicly in 2013 after I wrote my autobiography. Stand up in a room full of people and tell my story. This is what happened. This is the impact. And this is what we're all going to do about it, because I'm not the only one. I'm one of millions. And this has got to change. So I established Survivors of Abuse charity in 2016. And it's the only charity. We're local at the moment, but I want to become national. But we're the only charity nationwide to deliver a holistic health recovery program that is psychoeducational, and it tells victims and survivors, people who have been harmed, that what they've gone through is not their fault. What they've gone through, they need to give that shame and the guilt back to their perpetrators, because it's not their fault. It's nothing to do with them. And it's about understanding that there's healthy coping mechanisms that will help you regain your health and wellness, help you fulfill your potential, empower you to step out as your own person, rather than all of those negative coping mechanisms and strategies many of us adopt because we don't know any different. So it was really important for me to have a solution to help other people. So I have the charity over here helping people recover, but I also do a lot of advocacy and activism, which is about challenging those systemic failings that have been going on, so that we can make sure that we hold people, corporates, the government to account for the changes that need to be made to respond to child sexual abuse and exploitation in the best way that we can. So I knew that after my breakdown, that it just wasn't my work stress, because when I held my son in my arms, I had that overwhelming love and feeling of protection and feeling of, how dare anyone hurt you? They will pay for it. And then equally, as I've explained before, then I felt all of these other emotions. So I knew then that it was to deal with, or to do with rather, my childhood experiences. But I didn't know anything else. I've also shared in other interviews in the book that I was changing my son one day. He'd done a really pooey nappy. You know, those ones where it goes up their back, up their front. And there was no other way other than just stripping him off, binning the clothes and putting him in a bath to clean him down. I was cleaning him in the bath in a natural way, as a mother would clean a baby, because it's just covered in doodah. And I was cleaning around his genitals, and I had this overwhelming thought go through my head. You spent too long here. You spent too much time cleaning him. And yet I'm not even started for the amount of doodah that was on him. And I couldn't obviously just leave him. So I had my hand under his head. My hand went like that. It was like an electric shock. And the thought went through my head, are you an abuser? And I just screamed for my husband. He came running up the stairs wondering what the hell was going on. And I said, you need to take the baby, you need to take the baby, you need to carry on. And then I left the room, the bathroom, and I was just like in shock, crying, not knowing what to do. And then I said to my husband what the thought was, and he went, don't be so bloody stupid, because why would he think anything different? And I'm like crying, and he'd equally known about my breakdown at work because, yeah. So I went to the doctor and I shared with the doctor what had gone on. And he then said to me, anything happened in your childhood? Yes. Told him, not everything, but told him enough. And he went, it's normal response. I'm like, what do you mean it's a normal response? And then he said, if you've gone through anything like you've gone through and you've shared, you are probably going to have some thoughts like that. And he said, there's nothing wrong with having those thoughts. He said, you are not an abuser. You are just caring for your child. And then that also then gave me the courage to talk about it. Because when you feel like someone's going to judge you for doing something you know you're never going to do, why would you want to talk about it? Because social services come in, they take your children. See what I'm saying? So we've got to break the taboos of how trauma, because of abuse, what it causes. We need to have those conversations. Because without that insight from my GP at that time, I wouldn't have gone and got the help that I needed. So he signed me or referred me. He signed me off of work and referred me to this counsellor where I went for 6 weeks, because that's all you could get, 6 sessions on the NHS back then. And I don't think it's improved much today. And I just sat there and I cried my eyes out for 6 sessions, for 6 weeks on a trot. This counsellor never asked me anything. And at the time I thought, well, that was a bloody waste of time. I've got all of these issues going on, all of these thoughts and feelings, and no one's talking to me about them. But when I look back at it now, I never cried about any of the abuse that I'd gone through, because I would have got penalised for it. I would have got further abuse if I'd cried and shown weakness. So this 6 weeks where I turned up one week after another and just cried my eyes out, huge release for the body, huge release for the body. So that also, being able to just sit in a safe space, being able to be emotional in front of someone, was a huge learning in trust for me, and was also a huge learning in being able to express your emotions and talk about what you need to talk about without any penalty for doing so. Does that make sense? So even though she didn't talk to me, I would talk a few things to her. But now, as I said, that was back then, that therapy. Since that 6 sessions, I've had loads of different types of therapy to try and find out what would work for me. And it's really the EMDR therapy, which is trauma-informed therapy, that I had over 2 years, that has really helped me turn my stuff around. When you come to a place in your life where you feel really stuck, or where you just don't have the confidence, or you just can't speak up for yourself, or you can't stop people pleasing, then that is probably the time when you've got to really look inwards and go, what is going on here? It can't be me. That's what I did. I'm meant to be really happy right now because I've got everything I've always worked for and I've always wanted. I've got it all. Why am I so like this? Why am I so sad? Why do I feel depressed? Why am I not happy? And it was down to those adverse childhood experiences and the trauma impact, one on top of the other. So I think you can understand it if you understand post-traumatic stress disorder, but complex, where you've got layer upon layer. So when victim and survivors, or people who have been harmed, come to a place in their life where they recognise that something's just not right, then they may need to just start going, actually, what did happen to me as a child and young person? Does that impact me? And if it does, like many people it will, then that is when they need to go and seek help, support, whatever that happens to be for them. Because our lives are so different, everyone's, but there are commonalities of impact that people can get help and support for. When you have therapy, everybody thinks it's a cure-all. Everybody thinks it's, once I've had that, my life's going to be great. Everything's going to be fantastic. This is a journey. Healing isn't an end destination. What's been done to you, what lives inside of your body, how you turn up in the world is all impacted by what you've gone through. And if you don't deal with it in the best way for you at the right time for you, it can really damage your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health, and it can also shorten your life expectancy by 20 years. That is what the Adverse Childhood Experiences review study concluded. If you can't express how you're thinking and feeling safely and to a point where it can leave your body, you will either implode, cause yourself some harm in whatever way, literally self-harm, suicide, or you explode. You verbally attack, you physically attack somebody else. It explains things, but it doesn't condone things, okay? And I want that message to come across really clearly. Because if we're trying to break the cycle of patterns of behaviour, then we need to understand how it is we are impacted so that we don't take it out on other people in the way that things were taken out on us. And that's really important. Okay. So the support that someone may need will be individual to them. However, there are many charities out there that will address the needs of most victims and survivors. So, for example, if you've got anxiety, depression, complex PTSD, there are a lot of mainstream charities in the child sexual abuse and sexual violence sector that can help you. And it doesn't matter what ethnicity you are, what sex you are, or any of the other intersectionalities, there will be a charity out there that reflects you and your needs, okay? So I want to say that. You can go to the Survivors Trust website and you will find over 140 organisations nationwide that will fit you somewhere. You can, obviously, if you've got the funds, you can go and find a private counsellor that fits your needs, okay? If you are, and this is really someone that's gone through non-recent abuse, so if their abuse is not current, if your abuse is current, going on right now, there is Childline. If you're a young person, you can contact them. If you are an adult victim currently, you could go to a SARC centre, SARC, S-A-R-C, a SARC centre. You could go to a rape crisis charity, which are nationwide. And there are charities for men, there are charities for women. And then there's also the statutory services, the police, social care, health, So there's lots of different ways to get help and support. To get the right help and support, that is rolling the dice. Because ultimately, to get what is best for you, you need to understand how you're impacted. You need to understand what it is you need help for. So usually it's like an onion. You start peeling the onion. You get a little bit of help over here for this, then something else will rise up. Then you need to get the help for that. And then something else will happen. You need to get help for that. So for me, my recovery, as I said, it's not been linear. It's up and down. And there's big sections in the middle where I'm okay. Life is vibing. Everything's great. I'm able to study. I'm able to do so much. I'm able to be really productive. Then all of a sudden, I don't get justice through the courts. I hit a brick wall and I slide. So I needed different help and support at that time. And I had that help and support. And I shared it on my own podcast. In that therapy session, I actually killed my stepdad to get him out of my body because it was turning up everywhere. And when I had that thought that I needed to kill him, to get rid of him, and I said it to the therapist, before I said it to her, I said, you're going to report me to the police and you're going to get me locked up. And she laughed at me and she said, why would you think that? And I said, because I'm thinking dark thoughts. I said, I hate violence. I absolutely abhor it and I'm not a violent person. But I feel this intense rage that if I don't get it out of me, I don't know what to do with it. And she said, what do you think you need to do with it? And then I said, I need to. And she said, right, we'll do that then. So in my therapy session, I killed my stepdad in a safe environment and I literally felt my body change, like it let go of that anger. Because in my head now, he's not renting any space. In my head, he's gone, he's no longer here. He's here, he's alive and well, but he's not here anymore. So I can now live my life knowing that he's not here. He's got no control. He's not taking up any of my energy. I know that's very deep, and I know for some people, they probably think, oh my God, she's a professional, she's speaking like this. We need to talk about these deep things, yeah? Because if I wasn't able to express how I'm thinking and feeling, and if I wasn't able to deal with it, at some point, what would I do? How would I feel? I would break down again because that stress bucket would just keep overflowing. And if I wasn't imploding, self-harming, whether it is seen as a negative self-harm or a positive self-harm, keep working, keep running. Yeah, they're both extremes and they're both not healthy. They both need to be brought into balance. Yeah. Where am I meant to put my anger that I feel? Yeah. And I can truly understand why some people go and commit the crimes they do. I'm not that person. I could never be that person. I couldn't hurt another person. But that doesn't stop me feeling a certain way. Does that make sense? And that certain way that I was feeling, what am I meant to do with it? So I physically, obviously, didn't, but in my therapy session, dealt with it the way that I needed to deal with it. And after that, as I said, you process the trauma. It doesn't happen straight away, but you try and cognitively switch off from it all, but subconsciously your body carries on processing. So when people say, I've had therapy today, it's not just that hour that you have therapy, it's all of the processing time that goes on after it. And you can feel exhausted. You can feel like you don't want to be with society, you withdraw. And so I had lots of times where therapy's on a Wednesday, right? Nothing is going on Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday evening. Chris needs to go and walk. Chris needs to go and do something fun. Chris needs to sleep. Whatever Chris needed is what I put in place for Chris, yeah? So when it comes to you having therapy to deal with your demons, literally, you need to build in time to you to just decompress from what it is you've spoken about, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, because all of that needs to sort itself out, and it does over time. So it can be exhausting going through therapy, and people really underestimate that. Yes, so Survivors of Abuse was born because there was a need for holistic health recovery from trauma. That is why we're here. We deliver this 8-week course, which is groundbreaking, it's transformational, and it's life-saving. I get told at least one person on every single course, and I've done 13 now, that this has saved my life. And that is what makes it so unique. My hopes, I want to deliver this course nationwide. I want to be accessible to more people because we know its impact. So currently I've got a Do It For Survivors £75,000 fundraising campaign that I've just launched, because we want to bed down our infrastructure and we want to grow. So that's what's going on at the moment, and that's my hopes for survivors of abuse. If people can't get to us currently because we are very local at the moment, then I wrote the Breaking the Cycle self-help book, which is what the course is based on. So if you don't do anything else for yourself, get this self-help book. It is literally, can't even remember how much it is, £8. Yeah. And if you don't have the money, I can send you it for free. But obviously charity has only got a certain amount of funds to be able to do that for a certain number of people. But it's everything that I've spoken about today, and it's self-help, and it's based on mindset, nutrition, fitness and stress management, sleep hygiene and rest and regeneration. So it's about bringing balance back to your life. So however you're living your life, whatever lifestyle choices you're making for yourself, whether they're harmful or helpful, if they're at the two extremes, they're not going to be good for you long term. We need balance. And that is what I teach, and that is what I preach, and that is what I practice. So my hopes are to make this as accessible to as many people as possible. So the books are available on the website, and it's survivorsofabuse.org.uk. The 8-week course is free to participants, and again, they can apply online, and it's only accessible in South East London at the moment. I've been asked to put it online, but I refuse to do that because we need people in the room to feel safe, experience safe, to build trust, and they can only do that when they're in the room. So people can find me on every single social media platform. I'm Chris_Tuck_SOB. LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and all of the others that have come up. You're worth fighting for. What gives me hope is that we're having this conversation and it's going to reach more people, and that the ICSA inquiry has happened. We have those 20 recommendations now in black and white, literally, and that enables me to hold the government to account to make sure that they implement them, because I know how much blood, sweat and tears has gone into that. And I know that those recommendations, if they're not implemented, we are not going to get the foundational changes that we need to our culture, to our policies, to our procedures and our processes. So we will not be protecting children and young people like we should if this government or successive governments don't do what they need to do. But I've got hope that we can really push that through, because it exists. Deep question that, but a good question. So know that what's happened to you was not your fault. Know that the shame and the guilt that you may be holding on to is not yours. You need to give yourself permission to hand that back to your perpetrator, whoever that happens to be, and know that you deserve love, life and happiness after the abuse that you've gone through, and know that you can break the cycle and you can move forwards. I think bottom line is that you're not on your own. You're not the only person to have ever gone through any kind of trauma because of abuse. There are millions of us. But also for me, it's important for people that haven't gone through any form of abuse to understand the scale, the scope, the depth, the breadth, and to start having conversations about this so that we break the silence for those who have gone through it, and we make it easier for them to speak up and to get the help and support that they need and deserve. So 1 in 4 of people go through some kind of abuse before the age of 18. And I think that is underestimated. But let's just say 1 in 4. So that's 3 in 4 of society that may not be impacted by abuse. Can you be an ally for the 1 in 4? We need the 3 in 4 to be there for the 1 in 4.